Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Mount St. Mary's coach Brett Teach, who just took over there after many years as an assistant at VCU. Coach came up a lot when I interviewed the Cosby players after they won the state championship. Really excited to talk to Coach. Coach Teach, nice to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Let me give your background. I think you've been at VCU, I think, since 2010, right, Coach?
Correct. Yeah, I took the job there in 2010.
2010, working with Dave Gifford.
Mhm.
You guys have been to 3 NCAA tournaments. You guys won the Atlantic 10 last year. Yourself, you played at King College. I had a friend that played basketball there named Clarence Massey about the time you were there.
You're kidding me? You know Mooch?
Yeah, I know Moochie. We played together for many years.
Claire's one of my best friends. Yeah, I talk to him all the time.
You
He's
got to
an-
tell.
Married, I'll tell him for sure.
That's crazy. You know Moochie.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're a Hall of Fame goalkeeper there.
Yeah, we finally got Mooch in the Hall of Fame last year.
Oh, good. Yeah, he was a heck of a player. What a body on that guy, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you go to Georgia State. You overlap with Lefty Drizel, which is amazing. Who is just an amazing, legendary coach, University of Maryland. But there you took Georgia State to an NCAA tournament, '97, won a conference championship. Did some Division II coaching at Tusculum.
Hustle.
Yep.
East Tennessee.
Yep, won the conference every year there. Then you did incredible at NAIA, and this is before I think you're before you at Tusculum. But anyway, you got 4 Final Fours, 5 semis, 8 quarterfinals at AU Montgomery, Oglethorpe, and LaGrange. You coach ODP, coach club. Coach, did I get most of that right?
Yeah. Yeah. It just means I've been old, so I've done a lot. So I've been
You've
around.
done a lot.
Been
You've
around
done
for
a
a
lot,
while.
man. Well, first of all, taking over at Mount St. Mary's, after being an assistant for a long time, is there a lot to be said for for being an assistant and coaching your club and other things? Or did you really have an itch to be head coach again?
I think a little bit of both. When the way this kind of all worked out is Coach Gifford and I are very good friends. We were friends long before we worked together. He was a graduate assistant at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham, when I was coaching at Georgia State. And the UAB head coach at the time and I went to coaching schools together. I've been longtime friends. And so I would always do their camp in the summer. So I got to know Dave that way. And then just through the next 10 years, we got to be really close friends. And, for a while, it looked like in 2005, maybe, I was offered an assistant job at Akron. And, I'd had an itch to get back into Division One after been out for 5 or 6 years. And so Caleb Porter offered me one of his assistant jobs when he took the job there. And then I went, but we were in the process of adopting our child, our daughter. And it just would have made it very difficult because she was a ward of the state of Alabama. And so there were some different hoops that made it a little difficult. So after about 2 weeks, Caleb and I spoke, and I decided to go back to AUM. And I was fortunate that they allowed me to come back, but I'd done pretty well there. So I think it was win-win for both of us. And then, oddly enough, Coach Gifford took the job at Akron. And so Coach Gifford got the job at Akron that I had just decided it wasn't going to work for me. And he stayed there the next 4 or 5 years. And of course, they did really well. And in 2010, he got the opportunity to VCU. We'd always wanted to work together. And we had another really close friend named Ryan Pratt, who's now the head coach at Houston Christian University out in Houston, Texas, not too far from where I am now, actually. And Ryan also came with us. So our first staff, we were all best friends. And that was our first staff at VCU. And when I went there, it was with the idea of coming for 3 or 4 years and then moving on. But as life happens and your children get comfortable in their lives and your wife gets comfortable into her job and then I get comfortable, kind of with the life in Richmond, we just stayed. Coach Gifford and I got along great. We that second assistant role kind of moved between different people that were really good friends of ours. So, I'm working with one of my best friends, plus, somebody else, and the current assistant now, Lucas Paulini, played for me at Tusculum, came with me to VCU. So it's very much a family at VCU, and I was fortunate to have been there for so long. So, I've had many offers over the years, but not ever quite the one that I wanted. I've had a lot of Division II, a few Division Ones over the years, I was offered two jobs twice. So IUPUI offered me that job twice up in Indiana, and UNC Asheville offered me their job twice. And just timing both times, right after I visited UNC Asheville, within 2 weeks, COVID hit. And so that's why I didn't go in 2020. And then with IUPUI, just didn't seem to be the right time in my life to make a move. And so, as we were entering the playoffs this year, I got a call from a friend of mine saying, look, I heard Mount St. Mary's is gonna call you. And I, oddly enough, I'd just gotten a call from some alums at UAB wanting me to talk to their athletic director. And so I had a conversation with the AD at Mount St. Mary's, Brad Davis, and was really, really blown away by him. He's a brand new AD, started there in just over a year ago now. But his vision and his energy, and it was so positive. And I just felt like, he would be a great guy to join with, to build a program at Mount St. Mary's that, will live past my time coaching. And, they've had some great coaches there in the past, and then they dropped it. And so I thought the last group did a great job of getting it back. And so now my job's while I'm the captainership, is to move it along a little bit more. And it resonates with me because it's a small Christian school. King is also a small Christian school. I've always loved that environment. Tusculum's that way. AUM's a public school, but it's a little bit smaller. Oglethorpe's a small private school. So I've always done really, really well in those environments. And I just felt like, I've always felt like jobs are the right person, right place, right time. And I felt at home the second I spoke to him. I think after I got done speaking with Brad, I'm almost positive that he knew this is what he wanted to have happen. And the interview process was really quick and done. And so we got to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we still live in Richmond, and so I just got temporary housing up in Emmitsburg right now, and eventually we'll figure out how it's going to affect my wife. And my kids have both graduated high school now, so it's a little bit easier at that point to think about making a change in your life.
It's so beautiful up there. I live in Leesburg, so I'm only 50 minutes from you. So I, look forward to going to a couple of your games. Coach, when you think about all the changes that have come to coaching, not just like recently, the NIL and the portal, but also the number of kids that play soccer now is just exponentially grown since you started coaching. I know Mount St. Mary's has a lot of foreign players, that a couple Norwegian players I noticed. That's a big influence now. It wasn't so big then. I mean, it's always been part of it, but it's even bigger now. Do you like where college coaching is now? I mean, it really has changed a lot since you got into the game.
I actually love the college environment and the opportunity that we have to help the kids get ready for life. And so I don't think that's going to ever change. Our job's always going to be a bridge between their lives as children, teenagers, and kind of that safety net before you have to do it for real. And so I think that part, I grew up in a household where both my parents were college professors. My father was vice president of Georgia Tech for 40 some years. My mom was at Georgia State for many years as well. And then she's also taught at Kennesaw State and some others, but she also ran a private school, was kind of her thing. We owned a private school. So I've always loved the college model of athletics. Now that has certainly changed. And with the transfer portal and NIL, I think those are just simply big changes like we went through with, finally the enforcement of Title IX back in the 90s, and understanding that it's about each of these guys or girls that come into your program. For years, it was team, and players were seen as interchangeable parts, kind of like uniforms. But Lefty, actually, who you interviewed recently, said one thing to me when I was at Georgia State. He said, Coach, I'll be honest with you. If you invest in bricks and mortar or wins and losses, you're going to lose every time. But if you invest in each person in your program, then you can't lose. You'll never lose. No matter what the result, you'll never lose. And that really resonated with me and stuck with me through, that was probably in 1998. So for many years, that's kind of been how I've looked at each player in our program, and each of them brings a unique set of backgrounds and things like that. So I think at the essence of it, it's still the same. I think where it's different is players have more freedom now. They get to choose what they want. Well, it's the same in real life. You make choices, and sometimes those choices are great. sometimes you find out later, well, how those choices weren't great. You know, so I'm not one of these, oh, I hate coaching, I want to get out of it. No, not at all. In fact, I'm the exact opposite. I've had several opportunities to leave the college game and go youth or that. And for me, this is such a great age to work with. And it's been further reiterated with me working in the NPSL this summer down in Georgia, because I've reconnected with several players who have played for me 35 years ago. The owner of the team I coached played for me in 1990, 91, and 92. So at Oglethorpe University. And so I've had several players that were in those times reconnect with me this summer. And I just know that the small part I was able to play in their life resonated with them all the way to now. And what the players understand is how much each of them, you know, make my life richer and better. And so I think in the end, I've been fortunate because, you know, I have won a ton of games as a coach, but it's really more about, you know, how many people did we help, you know, kind of bridge the gap between, being a teenager and being an adult, and maybe some of the lessons they learn either from me or from the team or from the circumstances have helped them and guide them through life. So I think because that's my overall belief, I really don't think that the energy changes or the desire. I love it. I mean, there are things that, you know, are concerning, like, you know, that it's concerning that as a group that a lot of smart people that somehow we allowed NIL to get to what it is, that these kids have deserved to get money for years. And as administrators and presidents and coaches, we all are equally guilty of not, you know, really standing up for them a long time ago. And so, you know, I think now everything's just a result of maybe the leadership not being as attentive to what are truths in life that we need to probably have a better understanding of. You know, can we help these kids when you're putting, you know, in a football game, you're putting 100,000 people in the stadium and these guys can't get home, somebody dies in their family. And I know that's changed gradually over the years. So I'm probably not as big as an alarmist as others. But I do really think that it is a reaction to maybe not having understood, or as they say, read the room, you know, 20 years ago, where we could have really begun this and then maybe it had been a little bit more smoothly handled. But again, that's sometimes how life works. You don't know until you know. And so now we're dealing with that. But transfer portal doesn't bother me because, again, you know, I'm free to go to any job I want. You know, why shouldn't a player be able to go somewhere else? I mean, you know, I don't love it when I lose a good player, you know, so my job is to make sure that they see value in what we're giving them. They see value in our program. They see value in our education. That's my job. And if I do it right, then the vast majority of players will be pleased and happy and we'll grow a program to something special. If not, then they'll find something that fits them better. And it's just like, to me, it's like you go to the department store, you try on a shirt, you don't like it, you go to another one. And maybe you don't like that store, maybe you think, oh, I don't like their clothes, I'll go here. It is really simply that, just a little bit bigger. And the only thing that concerns me sometimes about the transfer portal in per se is that I do feel like kids give up too quickly.
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, I'm not playing. And instead of looking at it, you know, over a 5-year window, they look at it over a 5-month window, and now they're discouraged and they lose hope. And so that's one of the things I think that as coaches, we've had to address and adjust to is how can we help players when they're maybe not playing right away, but we know they have a really good future. How can we help them see that developmental path? Because I think that's why most people leave, is they don't see a pathway. They're either dissatisfied with the program or they're dissatisfied with what they believe is their pathway to grow, or they don't feel like they're growing anymore. So I think if we can address that, then I think, quite frankly, you'll have a lot less, you know, opportunities. But quite frankly, there are some Division I soccer programs that are able to NIL people, and it's going to be hard for me to tell somebody to go somewhere and maybe they're on a good scholarship, but somebody else can give them cash for $25,000 a year plus their education. You know, that's a difficult sell for me to say, well, stay here, you know, pay 10 grand, or stay here and do this, you know. So I think there will be rare exceptions where it makes sense for players financially. You know, if you can go to a school that's able to do that for their student athletes, then you consider it. But outside of those rare cases, I do worry about that we are giving up too quickly and running away from a challenge a little bit because it is easier.
Yeah, it makes you gotta, you got to sell to those kids a little bit, especially if you really believe in them. So, Coach, one thing, and I haven't been following soccer that long, since probably 2010. My own son started playing, and I got into it. I was a basketball and football player, but one thing I have noticed, the Division III players in Virginia, some of them are so good. I couldn't have believed that they wouldn't have been Division I players when I saw them play in high school. I have a hard time sometimes, distinguishing between Division III players at these top schools like, Mary Washington and Washington and Lee, and Division I players. Have you found over time, and especially with the portal, that where you can kids can move, you can get a kid who's not playing, at a Division I school, you can get him in, and he fits your lineup.
Mhm.
Have you found it's more difficult to, determine where each kid belongs?
I think one of the things that you have to look at it if, as a recruit or as a parent who's helped guiding their son or daughter to what they were looking at, I think one of the things that they become short sighted is that it's to some extent it doesn't matter to the division. What matters is the program success, their growth potential, and things like that. You know, I have two players from Mary Washington here on my summer team, and they're both doing very well for us. One's our second leading scorer, and one plays a valuable role every day. And we're in the final eight in the country tonight. So I mean, these guys are guys, and then we're playing against a bunch of Division I guys that play West Virginia or UT Rio Grande Valley or and then we have some other Division I guys on our team. It's really about you know the program you're in, the values that program has, and so I think in terms of the differences of Division I players, Division III players, and who can I think it's really, the biggest difference for me is really the experience that the student athlete wants. Um, because there is a difference in experiences. Like when you play in Division I, then you're basically saying, okay, I want this to be a full-time job for me for the year. I want to go, I want to train, every day of the whole year, basically, unless we're in a vacation period. I want to, be held to a higher standard every single day. Want to have an active weight program. I want to have all those things because at Division III, for instance, you're limited in your off-season activities. You get one match, and so it is very difficult if you want the experience of everyday connectivity. It's a little bit tougher in that respect than maybe it is for like at Mount St. Mary's, where we're able to be with our guys, pretty much all year. We have an 8-hour period and 20-hour period, and so we really only take a few weeks off each year. And so I think where and that doesn't mean that player A who went to, we'll use Mary Wash since you use them. Player A that went to Mary Wash couldn't play for me or Mount St. Mary's, or quite frankly, at VCU or George Mason or any of those. It's just that the pathway they've chosen for their life is that they want soccer to be super important, but then they want also time, you know, outside where they can have other interests, whatever it might be. Whereas when you're at a school like Mount St. Mary's, VCU, soccer is going to be your number one thing besides academics. And then, social life and other activities are going to have to be, really, really, put to the side a bit. Doesn't mean you can't experience them. It just means that you're going to have to be very good at managing your time and managing what you do. And so I think that's more important than anything is what is the experience you want as a student athlete? And then, what program best fits that for you? And I think that that's why you see a lot of crossover, because you will have guys going to Division III and realize I'm pretty good. And then they'll get an opportunity at a place like, wherever it could be, or you may get somewhere and you realize, man, I want a lot more, attention each day. I want to be able to get into the weight room with a strength coach. I want to do all this, year round. And maybe you realize, okay, maybe the Division III program can't give that to me. Am I happy enough here to stay, or do I need to look for then a program that's a little bit different? So I think that's really more what it's about. And, certainly like, Mount St. Mary's, we actually played, Mary Washington this spring, and they were probably the best team we played this spring. They're very good. They had something like 10 stars back from a team that 2 years ago was in a Final Four, and this past season were upset in the third round, but they're very good, and there'll be another national title hunting team this year. And so they play with a certain type of energy and belief and discipline and character that makes it very difficult. And we were a new team. We brought in 7 guys mid-year at Mount St. Mary's, and a lot of them were first-year guys, and we didn't hit the portal that hard. We went you know, guys that we brought in portal were guys I knew. And so we were able to build and grow, and fortunately for us, we were able to find a way to win the game. But it was a tight game, it was a tough game, and they were very, very good. And so I think that's really what it comes down to more is, you know, I think players are getting a better understanding of the differences. And I don't mean to not talk about NAI or Division II. I'm just using the comparisons are most prevalent in Virginia because we have very few Division IIs. I think we have what, Emory and Henry and Virginia
Virginia State and Virginia Union. Yeah.
State, Virginia State. It's Bob Jenkins, the coach there. It's in Richmond, basically. So yeah, those are the only two D2 schools we have. And so, but we have, you know, countless numbers of D3s and D1s. So I don't think we have a single NAI program. So I do think that's where I would differentiate, but I agree with you. There are more good players now than there ever have been. And so programs, and with the portal, you see a lot of Division I programs, you know, doing a third to a half of the recruiting out of the portal. And so now it takes away, I don't say takes away, it does change the opportunities for younger players to come in. So most people will fill their immediate needs through the portal. And then they look at high school kids more as longer term fixes. And I think that also presents challenges because now you got to decide, am I really going to want to fight to get on the field for 2.5 years, or do I need to go play? So I think there's a lot of different factors that are involved, but I do think that players at the highest level Division IIIs are going to be successful almost anywhere they play, quite frankly.
Yeah. How about as a coach? How do you enjoy the different challenges? You've done it all, D1, D2, NAIA. How do you enjoy it? And you've been an assistant at a D1. How do you enjoy the different coaching challenges at the different levels?
I love it. I mean, you know, I've actually, I think at one point I knew I was one of the only coaches ever to lead a team at every age or every classification of D1, D2, D3, NAI to a national tournament. So I have been kind of involved in a lot of different stuff. For me, the early part of my career was just a natural progression. I went from a women's program to a director of, where I had 2 programs for my next 2 jobs, to a Division I head job at 29. So when I was hired at Georgia State, and then, you know, I moved from Georgia State to AUM, and that was more of a family situation. We had a series of miscarriages, and so we decided to start our life over. So we moved, and that's why we ended up at AUM. And AUM is a great program, and we were 140-17 there or something. And we did very, very well there. But at some point in that process, it was difficult because we were up. I knew we were 10-0 before the season ever started, because there were 10 teams that we had to play that couldn't beat us. And so it really came down to the other 7 or 8 regular season games and how we did in the playoffs. And quite frankly, it was, I don't want to say boring, but it wasn't as challenging as I would like. And that's the one thing that Division I has over each of these other levels. D2 at Tusculum, we played a lot of good games every year. We probably were 4-0 when the season started, maybe 5-0. But at BCU, we've never been anything in 0, because every game is a challenge. Every game, every team you play in Division I can beat you, or you can beat them. Everybody's going to have a way to beat you. And so whether you may be 10-0, they may be 0-10, but they could turn around and get you. So I really enjoy the day-to-day preparation at this level, because if you don't get it right, the game will show you. And then you need to adjust, or else, quite frankly, then you're not coaching. And that's what coaching is, right? It's having a blueprint of what you want it to look like, creating training sessions that allow you to teach those things, try to help the guys, number one, learn, have the right attitude. So accept it, and then comprehend it, and then execute. I was called ACE, the ACE of learning, attitude and acceptance, comprehension, execution. So basically I feel like there's a great challenge for us to take a group of players with diverse backgrounds. And if you look at all my teams, BCU, AUM, all of them, our players come from everywhere, from different states, different countries. We all look different to each other, but we play for a commonality. And it's a really, that's what I love about athletics, right? It's, it doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is. What matters is, what is your contribution to the team? Can you be a successful part of our team? And it doesn't mean you got to score 50 goals or save every shot. It just means, can you contribute on a daily basis to the growth of the organization? And I think it's a great little microcosm of what they're going to face next 40 years. And so, I just think that for me, the essence of the job is the same. it's recruiting, developing, organizing, and then planning and staffing, all that kind of stuff. But then it's having a blueprint, teaching the blueprint, figuring out how the players you have fit best, and then creating a way for them to be successful. And so that to me is common. That's everything. Every program has that same challenge. Where it gets a little different is, how much margin of error do you have? Division, when you're an elite program, you may have more margin of error than when you're an emerging program. And so that's where I think, that's where the challenge for me is. And that's why I thought at Mount St. Mary's, I've had a lot of experience taking programs that, for whatever reason, were not as good as people would hope they could be, but have a good foundation, and then maybe help them in that growth process, to get to where, you can compete with the best that there is. And, you have that undying belief, and, we feel very strongly that we'll make a big step this fall, but our league's gonna be hard. So I can't sit here, I'm not arrogant to say, oh, we're gonna beat that team, but I think that we will understand how we want to play. And I think that we will do a good job of expressing that on the field. Now it'll just come down to, what, few breaks, and how good can we get before we run out of time.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Coach Lefty Drizel, and his advice to you is taking each player individually and trying to improve each player as you improve your program. You've had so much experience with different coaches. I'm sure you probably, I know you teach coaching, so you probably listen to thought leadership all over the world with soccer. Who are some of your other big influence on coaching in terms of leadership, but also in terms of tactics?
I think early on when I first started, I really gravitated toward basketball coaches, because I see basketball as soccer. I see soccer as basketball double on a much bigger surface, because everything's the same. In basketball, they call it help side. It's pressure, cover, balance in soccer. So tactically, the games are very similar. Just have a lot less control in soccer. So practice matters a lot more to help, because the players have more control of the game. You don't have a point guard. You have essentially 11 point guards. And so I used to gravitate, when I was very young in my career, to basketball coaches. And a lot of it had to do with, they were the most organized coaches. They were the most professional coaches that you dealt with on your staff at that age. And so back, when I first started, I had my college coach, who oddly enough was also a basketball coach, a guy named Danny Ferrer, who to this day is like a second father to me. In fact, he just texted me while we've been on the phone, and we talk almost every day and communicate every day for sure, and he's been down to a couple of my games in Columbus, and he was my college coach at King. And then as I got into it, my athletic directors, who happened to be basketball coaches as well, Jack Berkshire at Oglethorpe, he was a big star basketball player in the SEC for Mississippi State. And and then was the athletic director. He was the assistant at Georgia for many years. He moved to be athletic director, basketball coach at Oglethorpe. And I learned a lot about organization and about, individual discipline and things like that from him. And now also early on in my career, I was an assistant basketball coach at my first 3 schools as well. And I was only to recruit and to scout and things like that. I didn't do anything on the floor really, but it was because I had an interest in it. I was broke because I didn't get paid much. And so a little bit extra money. But I really learned the professionalism of the job at that point. Soccer wise, there's so many, because I've always been a student. I love learning from other people. Early on, I was very fortunate that I met some, my first couple coaching schools, I had a guy named Jake Shattuck, who was at Harvard at the time, and he was very influential. Before he passed away, I got to meet and learn from Walt Chisowich and several other guys in that era. Jimmy Lennox up at Hartwick, and kind of the founders of the game in this country, quite frankly. And then as I moved on in my career, and Ralph Lundy was kind of my biggest influence. He was the head coach at Erskine, who I actually replaced on the women's side when he moved to College of Charleston. And Coach Lundy ran, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he ran the largest camp in the Southeast forever. But he also was the head coach at the College of Charleston for 35 years. Prior to that was at Erskine, and he's 76, 77 years old, still running camps and still active and doing great. And he's a tremendous influence in my life. I just went and visited him about a month ago, and he was doing a camp in Alabama. So it was nice to spend some time with him. And again, just as you go along, you pick up tidbits from people, and it's really more how they model themselves. The soccer part, I've always felt I had a pretty good foundation and I understood. And tactically, I've really kind of, because I was never an assistant. So I had to forge my own way. Like I was never an assistant before I started coaching soccer. I was a head coach at 23. And my first team went to national final. And so my very first team, I had to figure it out. And I didn't know anything what I was doing. I was running around and going crazy on the sidelines and all that kind of stuff. And my team, despite my coaching, went all the way national title game and lost a heartbreaker in overtime to Berry College's back, NAI girls back in the day. And but I learned more about how to carry yourself, how to be respectable, how to also then respect and really respect people. And that's kind of the thing that I think we get lost in sometimes is we're in a people business. And so as I moved on, I tend to gravitate toward coaches who are like that. And like I said, I think I'm part of an era of coaches. I'm 60. So really from about 45 to 60, we're fortunate enough, or really 65, I would say, we're fortunate enough to kind of been around all the groundbreakers. Anson Dorrance, Elmar Bolowich down in North Carolina. I just saw Elmar 2 weeks ago. Elmar's a very good friend of mine. He's down in Jacksonville. We played Jacksonville a week ago tonight for the conference title. And we beat them, and I got to spend some time with Elmar before the game. And Elmar's been a huge influence in my life. We've traveled a few times together, and I learned quite a bit from him. So when he was at George Mason, it was great to have him back in the community, to be around him, as much as because I'd never been around him that much before. We had a really nice time. I know it wasn't a long tenure there, but he is still a very influential figure. And Clemson, we had Trevor Adair, who ended up in Virginia when I was here to start. And so I just was able to learn from people that, very young, that I don't think a lot of people get access to. I got to work with a couple national teams when I was very young, just because I lived in Atlanta, quite frankly. And so I'd get a call. Jay Miller, who at the time was U17 national coach, asked me, I want to come out and be an assistant because he was going to have training camps in and around Atlanta. Oh, yeah, you want to come out? And that's really how, I didn't do anything to earn it. They just let me do it. And so you get around people that are, that have so much knowledge and growth. Mark Burson in South Carolina was another guy I knew early on. He had recruited me out of high school a little bit, so I got to know him that way. And then, as you get into your job and you do it your way, you begin to realize, man, this isn't as easy as it looks. These people have something they're doing right. And so, can't be afraid to ask. And then in terms of like just pure soccer side, the recruit coaches in Atlanta who really early on helped me a lot in my coaching. One was a guy named David Chadwick. And back in the old NASL days, Chatty was the head coach of the Atlanta Chiefs. And he's just been a guy that never met a stranger, doesn't have a hint of arrogance about him, even though he's coached and played at levels I'd never dream of, and he would spend time whenever I saw him, and hey, teacher, come on, let's get a cup of coffee, and we talk for hours. And sometimes about soccer, but more just about life. And one of the things I learned from all the coaches that I admired was how much kind of appreciation they had for more than just the game. They love the game, they're consumed by it, but then there are other things that they love as passionately, besides their family. I'm talking about for instance, Alan Dawson, who was at Old Dominion for years and years, he's an Oakland Raiders fan, now a Vegas Raiders fan. And he lived it. For whatever reason, when he got here, the Raiders were the big thing. Elmar loves to be out in nature and hunt and go to Alaska. And, it wasn't for me, but, he wanted to go out to Alaska and live on the nature for 21 days each year. So they would do that every few years. And you just have different things like that. And another guy that was really instrumental, kind of in my early career, is a guy named Bill Holloman, who ran the NSCAA, now called the United States Soccer Coach Association. Bill was a great high school coach in Atlanta, legendary, won a number of state titles, but just, he ran the Detroit venue of the 94 World Cup. And then he ran the Olympics for Olympic soccer in 96. So he's one of those unbelievable organizers, but he also was always just a great guy. And I think that's where I've been really fortunate, is kind of the founders of soccer in this community and the whole community. Kenny Krieger's another one I met early on.
Yeah.
He and I were more similar in age. I know he recently passed, but he was a wonderful person, such an influential person in this area and in the Northern Virginia area. And obviously his daughter's done okay as well.
Yeah.
but just, but there's stories like that in every community. I was down in Tallahassee, there's a guy there named Andy Warner, who's been down there for 30 years, and he is Tallahassee soccer. And I know all these guys, I know them well enough to just consider them friends, and a little bit younger, but they'll start having conversations. I remember I was coaching in the region camp. This has been 15, 20 years ago now. And you had Bob Gansler, you had Gwen Williams, who was at time Bermuda's national coach. You had it was Gansler, you had Jay Miller, and there was Steve Sampson. Well, two of the coaches coached in the Senior World Cup for the US, Bob Gansler and Steve Sampson. Jay Miller coached in multiple World Cups as a youth coach. And then there was one more person, I cannot remember for the life of me his name. But we were just sitting around and Gwen. And Gwen coached in all kinds of CONCACAF qualifying games. Gwen's actually living in Richmond now, so we've got to be really close for the last 3 or 4 years. But, again, we had what I called the legends, the guys who made soccer possible here within our grasp. We got to know them. We got to listen to them. And as it's funny, the older we get, the smarter people we know are, right? It's like, wow, they really were right. Back to say, what these old guys know, they don't know what they're talking about. But the truth is they did. And so I think that's what's kind of modeled my career, was just the flow of experiences I've had between the college administrators and coaches, and then in the community of soccer. I've been so fortunate to be around people that were absolute pioneers and gave everything of themselves and changed lives, changed mine. I never played for any of them.
Coach, how important is it to you that your team plays attractive soccer? Like, as a basketball guy, and I played football as well. We don't talk about playing attractive. We just try to win. It's very practical with those sports. But soccer, one thing you learn about it is that people talk about the method you win. And I know when I started following soccer, Barcelona and then Spain were on top. Everyone was trying to play triangles and tiki-taka. But keep possession. And then other times you see teams, very British type teams, are just the ball's in the air a lot. They're trying to win those headers, and they're just trying to not make mistakes in their own third, and they're trying to get the ball in the third and put it in the back of the net. But what about you? Is that important for your teams to play attractive soccer?
It is, but not for the reason to please people in the crowd. I really don't care about that too much, because if you win, they're going to be happy in the end. So for me, it's more about control. One of the things that every team that I work with, I always talk about, to me, there are 3 ways to control the game. The first one is with your personality. What I mean by that is you just believe so much in each other that whatever the game presents, you're gonna fight through it. It may be a game where you gotta kick everything long. Maybe a game where you play short. It doesn't matter. It just matters that you're so connected to the group of players around you that you're gonna figure it out. Whatever the game presents, okay, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that. That's the easiest one, because quite frankly, all that requires is a willing spirit of a player and then a decent team connectivity. But it's the least successful because, again, you don't have any control of the game. The next way is through use of your pressure. Where do you pick the team up? Where do you drop off? How do you create counterattacking moments? How do you create repetitive, traps, double teams, things like that? And so this requires now groups to think together, because if you're going to high press, you can't have one player not bought in or not paying attention, because you're leaving a hole and the ball will find the hole and it'll get through. It's just like water. I always say the ball's like water. If it's not airtight, it's getting through somewhere. And so for me, that's the second way. Still not the most effective way, but it's more effective than your personality. Third way is through your possession. And that means that if you're on the ball, you get your spacing, your movement, your timing, the speed of pass, speed of play, thought of play, you get that right, then it doesn't matter who your opponent is when you have the ball. Now, it matters when they have the ball, but when you have the ball, you can dictate eventually what the defense looks like in certain positions. If you think about it in basketball terms, when the ball goes to the wing, it's always going to look the same. Now, maybe you're in a 2-3 zone, you could be man-to-man, but you still have, it's always going to look the same. So we know if we put the ball in that space, that they're going to have to react this way. If not, we're just going to attack. And so what we do is we minimize the variables that we could lose with. So I think in a game, there's maybe 1,000 things that can happen to you if you don't have control of the game. If you have control of the game with the ball, every game's going to look the same. It's just a matter of, can you solve the variables? Can you solve the fact that you're going to have counterattack moments? Can you solve the fact that you're going to have to deal with longer balls? Can you put good enough pressure on them that they don't get those opportunities? Can you deal set pieces? But they're going to be in broken moments, and you got to be able to deal with those. So you have to condition those moments. And so for me, yes, I believe in attractive soccer, but attractive soccer to me means that we are controlling the game with all three of those aspects I talked about. Our personality, we believe in each other at the highest level. Our pressure is good. We drop off and we go based on what our plan is for that day, do a counter press. And then when we have the ball, we are able to move the ball effectively while always keeping the vertical ball in mind. So we always look vertically, and we move the ball to move the opponent to find a vertical seam. And then if you watch my teams play, we score a lot of the same types of goals over and over again. And so, like I said, I'm very clear with them of how I want it to look. And then we rehearse it and train it all the time. And so every training session then feeds into what I want it to look like. So for me, people will say it's attractive because we're on the ball quite a bit. Like my summer team, we're averaging close to 600 completed passes every game. But it's not for the reason of being aesthetically pretty. It's because when the other team doesn't have the ball, they can't score.
Yeah.
We have it. The onus is on us. Now it's hard. Early on, we had some tough results. I mean, I think we started out the year 2-1. So we won our fourth game. So 1-2-1 after 4 games, and we're 8-3-3 now. So you can gradually tell as we were struggling to score goals early on, and as we've gotten better and better and better, we are able to now find goals. I think we've scored 3 goals in most of our playoff games, at least 2 in every one. Now we've conceded too many. That's a different story, but we've begun to understand how to break teams down and how to get into it. Now tonight's opponent, unfortunately, is very, very good. So it'll be a good battle, and we both like to be on the ball. So it'll be a battle of who can do wills. But that's why, for me, to answer your question, I prefer the more aesthetic game, is because I believe it gives you more control of the outcome.
Yeah. Is it a seamless transition for you to go back and forth from coaching club, and then coaching college? You've done both. I think you've done ODP as well. I'm sure it's a different challenge. They're both challenging, but is it seamless, and is it positive? Does it help you as a college coach to continue to coach club?
Yeah, I think I've coached club every year since 1990, except for 2. My first year at VCU, I didn't do it because, quite frankly, I just want to get settled into life at this level. And then my first year at Tusculum, I didn't do anything. Same reason. I was taking over a program that had been disbanded. They got in trouble the year before. So I was having to come in and resurrect the program and all that kind of stuff. So those are the only 2 times since 1990 that I haven't been involved with a club team. Now, there have been years where I didn't have an actual team that was mine. I was working with 3 or 4 teams, or I was working with the academy. But I had 2 times a week, every week, training with them. And where I think for me, early on, it was a way to create recruiting ties. That's why I did it originally, because you get to know club coaches, you get to know players at that level, you get to see players, because fortunately my club teams have usually done pretty well. So you get to see players with a lot on the line, and so I think, wow, I really don't like that kid. Or if I saw him 1 time a year and he looked really good that day, maybe I didn't see the temper tantrum or the pouting when things were difficult. And so it does give you, I think, some recruiting advantages. But as I've gone on through the years, what I really like about it is it allows you to, be even more idealistic than you are as a college coach, because, you're able to say, this is how we're going to play. And you get to see, does what I do work? And does it really work? And does it work for any group that you take over? I had a really unique challenge this year, and I had a U19 team, which most of the guys that were on Cosby played for. I think I had, between my 2 teams, I think I had 17 players of Cosby's top. So I basically, Coach Anderson and I laugh all the time. I said, look, you owe me a medal or a ring or something. So
At least a beer.
yeah, exactly. Well, Coach Anderson's a great guy. So
Yeah.
he's awesome. And he came to a bunch of our club games, and he's involved in club coaching as well. But my 17s were kind of just a ragtag team put together. They hadn't been pretty successful, and they had some guys get moved up to Richmond United, which is the ECNL team in our area. And we did this, I have an assistant I work with quite a bit. His name's Brian Rinderly. Brian and I worked with both the 19s and 17s. And the 17s, the first weekend they played, we were gone. They got beat like 10-1 one game, 5-0 another game. And we're supposed to be a first team. We're getting belted. Well, we had a nice little week of training where we kind of sorted out some things in terms of, priorities and how you defend in these spaces, how you do this. And so at the end of it, we ended up playing a better team that beat us 10-1 the next week. We played a team, Soka, who's in the ECNL regular league. We beat them 4-0 or 4-2. We're up 4-0, 4-0 half, and they pulled a couple back because I think they're like, what's going on? I think our guys like, what's going on? Get a little nervous and gave up a couple goals. And then we played the team that would beat us 10-1, and they beat us 3-2. And our coach is like, are these the same guys? Fast forward a couple months, we didn't lose a game. Like the entire league season, we never lost a game. We ended up winning, finishing second in the league point wise, but didn't lose a single game. And the team that had beaten us 10-1, we ended up drawing at the end of the year, and they were fortunate that they drew us. And so I think it's really rewarding to see that even though, the club players in general aren't as good as the players you work with at the advanced levels, that what you do works. You just have to maybe figure out, okay, how's it fit this group best? Because I have a certain way I like to play, but for my 17s, it didn't work. It wasn't going to work because they didn't have the player in one of the positions that you have to have. They didn't have like a Rodri for Spain or, and so we had to double that position with two guys. And so now it makes it a little more difficult. So I think, and then my favorite age to work with is like 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
I think you have a great opportunity to really hit these guys or girls and grow them exponentially.
Yeah.
And where I'm different than say a full-time club coach is if I get fired, it's okay. I got a real job. So I can come out to them and I say, I can hold demands a little bit higher than they're used to. And there's some gnashing of teeth early on with me because I set very high standards. But nobody ever talks back because they do, they're gone, they know it, they're out of practice. And so, when I had like Dennis and Nikita, I had those guys, the Hayes brothers, for 2 years. And the training sessions that they were a part of, they looked like college sessions. He would come to our U19 session. We had a goalkeeper coach who's now the head coach of that age group, Ronnie Pascal, who was a longtime pro. He's our goalkeeper coach at VCU for a while, and was a full-time college coach for many years, and then got into selling turf. And so now he sells turf, but he's still, he's a phenomenal coach. And he came out and trained our keepers every single week. But his son played for us, so that's why that happened. And so he'd come to training, and we would have countless numbers of kids from other teams come train with us because they were able to get in an environment. Because players always follow coaching; they always follow it. That's where they go. That's why you see so much club jumping because they're dissatisfied with maybe the experience they're having. And so somebody tells me, guy who was player of the year, Ryan Laundrie, and I had a long conversation before he decided to come play for us. He's like, well, coach, I know you can really help me in my recruiting process. That's what everybody says. He said, so I want to play for you. I said, well, Ryan, let me take that pressure off of you. I'll help you no matter what. I believe in you as a player. I'd love to have you, but if the only reason you want to play for me is you think I can help you in the recruiting process, then you know what? I'll do it, and you play for who you want to play for. And he said, Coach, I want to play for you. I said, no, I need you to be totally bought into everything we do. Because he was coming from an area where, he was the best or second best player at Richmond United. And now he's coming down to a team that he's going to look at and say, wow, it's down a level. But it really wasn't. We were a very good team against, region league team or national league teams. I mean, we beat Charlotte 4-0. I mean, that group could play when they got it going. And Ryan was amazing. Like, was a leader, was a captain. He 100 miles an hour every day. And when you get him and a nut job twins together, those guys, they train harder than almost anybody I've ever worked with. And that's why I wanted him so badly at VCU. And then that's why we got him there. So that was kind of the model we used. And so club practice for me started out to be a way to get into recruiting. Then it probably fed my ego a little bit. It was nice to win state titles and go to national tournaments, and won a Sun Bowl one year, won Dallas Cup one year. So I got to do all this fun stuff. But in the end, it turned out that I just really enjoyed, helping kids grow up and showing them that they could react to a demanding coach, somebody to ask you for more than you believed you can do. I mean, I've had so many players over the years say, Coach, you believed more in me than I did. And that really drove me to improve. And now these kids are millionaires because they've done way more than I would have ever expected them to do, and some of, they're all successful in their lives, whether it's family men, teachers, wherever they are, because, they were able to take the lessons they learned in their youth sports, put them in to apply them along with lessons they learned from their family, and were able to become the successful people they are. And so it's nice to have a small part of that. And it's kind of what I feel I was put on earth to do anyway.
Yeah, I can't tell you how pleased I was, how happy I was to meet Ryan and Evan and the Hayes brothers. Just really nice kids. We had a good talk. Now, with those kids at Cosby, how important to development, if at all, is that high school experience to them? Now they won a state title. There were a lot of Division Ones on the field in that Final Four. That Cosby team is stacked, as you know, because you've coached many of them. But how important is it? I mean, it's different. They spend a lot of time beating up on teams in the regular season, kind of like you used to do in the NAIA. But the state championship game, there was a huge crowd there. There was a lot of emotion there. They won it on a golden goal. Are those experiences important to their development?
Yeah, I think in an odd way, yes. I look back to when I was in high school, and my high school experience was amazing. We played in front of big crowds in Atlanta. I was in Metro Atlanta, so we had, my high school, Dunwoody High School, was a school of 4,000 people. So we had a lot of students come to games, and we had parents. And it's the only time in a club player's career you play in front of your peers, your friends, and everybody thinks you're great, even though you may not be. And by the way, that Cosby team, the only two starters that weren't our guys were Evan and Javi. All the rest of the 11 starters were guys that played for me either at 17s or 19s. And, again, so I did a good job not messing them up for Mike. I'll say that. They won despite my coaching. But no, I think that when it's done right, and Coach Anderson's a great example, they get better because of him, I'm not sitting here I'm not a Cosby fan club member or anything, but I do know that Coach Anderson is kind of an old school, believes in what he believes in. He asks players to behave a certain way, respect each other, respect the game, respect the referees. And his teams are always good. And that's why, because he demands more from them than they would demand from themselves. And so I think anytime that you have a situation where you're forced to grow, it's good. Now, maybe on the field, it was easy for him for a lot of it. And it was. I mean, I think I scored 98 goals and gave up 7 maybe. But, the fact that they got to play in front of people, Dennis scored a goal he'll never forget the rest of his life. Ryan got accolades that he'll never forget. They all were able to play together. And I've always believed there's something about when you're part of a team, I call it special. There's many different things you call it. I've been doing this is my 40th year almost in coaching. And I can tell you I've probably been part of 8 or 9 teams over that time as a player, as a coach, that I would say a piece of that team will be with me forever.
Yeah.
A piece of the Cosby team will be with each of those kids for the rest of their life. So how can that be bad? It's not bad. Now, is it as good as, Fairfax Brave playing, what's it called, Northern Virginia now, used to be called Loudon? Or
It's Northern Virginia, NBA, I believe, right?
yeah, NBA. Or is it as good as Richmond United playing VDA? No, it's not. The quality's not going to be the same. But because you have 2 smaller fields, you have all the other stuff that goes along with it. But in the end, the lessons you learn, the camaraderie you build, and the way you get to learn with other people, it's still sacrificing what you do for the greater good. And I don't see in any walk of life how that's a negative. So I have a little different view on high school soccer than most people do. I really support it. I love it. I wish we were able to do a better job getting in proper fields and things like that. But, it's still an amazing experience. And, now on the flip side of that, do I recruit it? No, I don't really go to many high school games. I've probably been to 10 in the last 20 years, and again, the Richmond kids I didn't have to see because I knew them all from club and all that. And then the Northern Virginia kids, I spent, an amazing amount of time in Northern Virginia watching kids play. It's kind of how we built our program at VCU. And if you look at my roster now at Mount St. Mary's, we have a number of Northern Virginia, Richmond type kids on our team, and that'll continue. And we'll get more involved in Maryland, Jersey, and those areas as we go. But really and truly, I think high school is an opportunity to play in front of your peers, to band together, to try to win something special. And quite frankly, to have the first time in most of their lives, they have the weight of the team on their back. Because most really good club players are going to be the best high school players. And if you're a really good club player, you're still going to have 8 or 9 more if you're a good team who can, like, you have a bad day, somebody else can do it. Well, if you're Ryan, Dennis, Nikita in that high school team, you can have a bad day and somebody can pick you up. But if you're, the 1 or 2 elite level players in your team, like so many of these high schools have, you have the burden of carrying the team on your back. And that's not a bad burden to have, because you then understand the responsibility that you have as a player.
Yeah. Well, I went to Robinson coach, and it was Christian Rodriguez did a tremendous job for us this year, and they lost on a disallowed goal. And that kid, his team was very special. Our team, Robinson's, very special, and it was a heartbreaker to see them lose away. But I wanted to ask you about 2 kids that 2 players that I've interviewed to play at VCU that you've coached. One of them's Andres Rodriguez is one of the best high school players I ever watched play. I watched him play a club game one time. He must have made, a couple hundred passes. I don't think he made one bad pass. I mean, guy's a machine. He won a state championship, beat my son's team. My son was at Yorktown, and Andres was at Hilton. And I also wanted to ask you about Simon Cargbo, who did a tremendous job at West Potomac. He came in mid-season and took them to almost to the state quarterfinals, I believe. I think they lost in the semis. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about talk a little bit about those 2 players.
Yeah, Andreas was an interesting thing I'd heard over and over from Matt Lacey up at VDA. He said, "Look, you need to come see this kid. He's the type of kid you guys value at VCU." He was going to go to Mason, but it didn't work out. They changed coaches, and then he's doing a post-grad year now, trying to get his grades. One of those things where he's just working on his preparation to go to college a little bit. So I went up and I watched VDA play Richmond United one weekend, and within 10 minutes of the game starting, I called Dave, said, "We need this kid," because he fits as that guy in the pivot of the team that can play. And so he, we were fortunate. We were able to work it out to get him to come to VCU and be a part of our program. And, when Coach Gifford saw him, he loved him. When Lucas and our other staff saw him, they're like, "Man, he's the right type of kid." Now, we didn't know what to expect. He came in at a time where we had a 5th-year senior playing in that role who was very, very good. And so he played a little bit here and there, but, it's tough. You know how it is to go from that level to then a major Division I college program. And so he was, he had some habits that he had to learn that, one of his habits that he's had to grow was he doesn't look, he just rolls because he knows he's more skillful than the next guy, so he can just get the ball and roll and do whatever. Well, in college, they pick you off and they go to goal and they score. And that's what happened to him in his first game against Akron. It was an exhibition game. He rolled with the ball, guy took a right off his foot, scored. And because he never looked. And so he learned a really hard lesson early on. And so he didn't play a lot in the first couple games. We had a couple injuries. We go out to St. Louis, and St. Louis has 7,500 people. It's their homecoming at the game. And he gets his first college start. And he was magnificent. Like, he ran the show for us. He was a single pivot and was able to get the ball. I think he was something like 86 for 93 connected passes, and like 40% of those were forward, which for his role, you go back and square a lot. And it was just a phenomenal game. And I think, from then on, I think we knew that, it may take some time, but he was going to continuously grow. And at times last season, he was the difference in games. Now, like anybody, he still has things to work on. He doesn't love defending, and there's some other things that I think he'll grow as he goes. But no, and he's a humble guy. He's a great guy.
Great kid.
And I think he's really knit into the fabric at VCU. He's a key, and I think there's a chance we could watch him on TV one day. I mean, he's a really special kid. Simon's one of my all-time favorites. Really interesting story, because he went to North Carolina Wesleyan first.
Mhm.
He played for the now Mary Washington coach there, Jason Kilby.
Mhm.
And so, one of our assistants saw him. And I'm pretty sure it was Josh Tudela was our assistant from like 2012 to 2014, our other assistant. And he captained Indiana to 2 national titles, and he played for LA Galaxy. And so his post-pro career it started out with us as an assistant coach. And so he kept calling me about the Simon kid. He said, "Teacher, let's go watch Simon. He's good. You'll like him." So we go see him, and he does pretty well, he does pretty well, so things work out, we bring him on campus, and because he grew up in a tough circumstance,
Yeah.
didn't really have a lot of family around him, and he was pretty much on his own. He pretty much just kind of, he had a coach who looked after him and took care of him, and, I don't want to get into too many names or details, but he was taken care of by a couple people in the community, but he couch surfed for a while, did all kinds of stuff.
Mm.
But he's just this amazing kid, always happy, always, come out and work. But he had issues with his eyes. He wasn't able to, so his playing career at VCU never kind of went like he would have wanted it to go, because just some physical issues that, he needed to get taken care of. And if nothing else at VCU, I think we were able to help him physically, be sound and get him ready to but man, he has been amazing as a coach, and he gives back so much. And there are going to be guys that he deals with in tough circumstances that he's able to relate to, like that I could never relate to, but Simon will be right there with him and will help him. And I just think he's an amazing person, and I think, and that's what I was saying earlier, we were a richer program because he was in it. He made us better, even when he was injured, even when he couldn't play, because, his just enthusiasm and his drive and his perseverance. And, a kid would have a bad ankle and be limping around a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. And you got Simon, who could barely see out of one eye, and he's out there fighting, trying to hit diving headers and doing things because he had detached retina, I think, for years, and he had to get fixed. So, you take a kid like that, and it's just amazing. So both those guys made massive contributions to the program. Andreas is still doing so. And I get a call from Simon about every, 2-3 months. Coach, I got a player for you, And I know he does the same thing with Coach Gifford and other coaches. And so, he's in it. He's a guy that's going to he'll be a very influential person in soccer in the community for a long time, because, he has the right value system. He's a great student of the game, and he cares about kids beyond what most people do. And so, I was fortunate to be around both those kids, and, they're different, but they're both, their impacts are, Andreas's impact on the field will be immeasurable by the time he's gone. And Simon's both on and off the field, because of the type of person he is and type of, I think, future they both have, I think will always be credits on VCU, and I'll just be glad to have been a part of their careers.
Well, that's great, because I'm sure they're lucky to be around you. When I interviewed Simon, he turned that program around at West Potomac after they had a really good coach that got in a jam of some kind, and he just did an amazing job. This young, poised guy. But anyway, let's get quickly. I know you got a game tonight. Let's get quickly to Mount St. Mary's a little bit. I know it's a beautiful town. It's in Emmitsburg, I believe, Maryland. I used to go to this restaurant called Shamrock Cafe. They closed it. I guess it didn't survive COVID, unfortunately. But what do you think that's going to be a positive? It's a beautiful small town, but it is a little bit away from the big city. Frederick's probably not that far away, but
Frederick and Gettysburg are both about, one's 10 minutes, one's 20. And
yeah.
that's
So
any kind of action.
yeah. So what do you think about the location? It's absolutely stunningly beautiful there. But what do you think about the location, getting kids to come there?
Well, I love it because of where we are. People say, "Oh, that's a real." Well, you know what? We're 4 hours, 5 hours from everything.
Yeah.
What I mean is, like, we have such a good community to draw from soccer wise. We're an hour from Baltimore, an hour from Dulles. We're only 2.5 or 2.5 to 3 from Richmond. So we're able. Our footprint is in an area where I think we can really successfully get guys, but it's not for everyone. I just tell them, look, when you come here, you're coming here to get a degree and to be put in a really professional environment. If you're looking for a big sorority or fraternity, then this is the wrong place. Don't come here, because we are a small Catholic university. If you're looking for nightlife downtown, guess what? It's not a place for you. All right. So we kind of eliminate that in the very beginnings of our recruiting talks with people. Tell them exactly who we are. That's my whole philosophy in recruiting. We're open, we're honest, nothing to hide. We don't try to trick kids into coming. Don't try to talk you into coming. This is who we are. This is what we have. This is where I could see you fitting. This is where I see your development could look like. You don't want it, you don't. And basically, we I've been really successful my entire career with that. But what I love about Emmitsburg as a father is I would have no fear dropping my kids off.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
it is a very quiet, beautiful town, but there are things to do. It's not like it's in the middle of, Kansas with the tumbleweed and you gotta go 100 miles. You have to go, I mean, you have to go 20 minutes to Frederick or you have to go 10 minutes to Gettysburg to get like anything, that you're used to if you're from a, urban situation. But it's not, it isn't for everyone, but no school's for everyone. You have to, like VCU, we were largely a commuter school. We had, I think, 8,000 beds on campus. We had 30,000 students. So, we're largely a commuter campus. We're downtown, and it's a beautiful area. And if you're into commuter schools, that's what it was. And I happened to grow up on Georgia Tech campus. And that's exactly what Georgia Tech was. So that's what drew me to VCU. It was vibrant, exciting. What I love about the mountain is it looks like when you're a kid, you dream college looks like.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of my experience in college, a picturesque, kind of village, Bristol, Tennessee at the time. And then, if you need to go somewhere, well, Knoxville's an hour and a half away, you can go there. But we're closer, thank goodness, to Frederick and Gettysburg, which aren't major cities, but they are, Frederick's obviously a suburb kind of the DC area. And so you do have everything, normal signs of suburbs as you would. So again, and we try to select out those that we think will not be happy culturally very quickly. And just we're honest with them. And when they come visit, this is what we are. And it's not for everyone. And I don't hold that against anybody. Where I went to college wasn't for everyone. But I loved it. It resonated with me, even though I was a big city kid. I loved being out in the country. I don't know why. I never would have guessed I would have liked that, but I did. So I think really it's more about finding people that have shared values, shared common interest. And then they want to, ultimately we ask them, do you want, basically we say, do you want to be a pro? Because that's the type of training you're going to get. And doesn't mean you'll make it. I can't make somebody take you, but we're going to put you in an environment every day, a competitive environment where you're going to have to grow exponentially, or, you'll find out this isn't what I want. So basically that's what we tell them, and it's straight up. And we've been very fortunate, I think, with our recruiting class this year. We've got a number of players, probably a little too big for this class, but we wanted to give everybody a chance and see what it looked like. And so I think we'll thin out the roster as we move on, but we'll be above 40 this year. But we do graduate we have a large group of graduate students and seniors. So, so our next class will be more like, 5 to 7 we'll bring in. And then because I kind of try to replace all those guys with this class.
Yeah.
All the guys we have leaving, I don't like to replace guys year to year. I like to go a year out. So if I know I have juniors in these roles, I'll try to get them now. So this crew that we brought in was in response to what we lose at the end of next fall.
40 players, coach. It's too bad you don't have special teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coach, 2 of the last 3 years have been tough at the Mount. They had pretty tough records. 2 years ago was very solid. From year to year in college, is it a concern? Is it very doable, a normal course of business to turn that culture around? Because you have so many kids coming and going. Is that something that concerns you, or is it just a matter of how you start and get them to play the way you want them to play?
I think concern would be way too strong a word.
Mhm.
Because every program, every coach will have his own plan, right? And I believe very strongly in mine. It's been successful many times at many places. It's been successful this summer because my club this summer is a startup, first year program, and we're in the Elite 8 of the NPSL. And it doesn't mean it's not all me, it's an organization. And I'm smart enough to realize that the coach is only one aspect of it. I probably, if I didn't truly believe in the direction of the university and with the athletic director that we have, and we've made a presidential change. I love the old president, but kind of knew what the new president was all about, even though he got there after I did. If I didn't understand all that thoroughly, I probably wouldn't have gone there. So I really feel like things are in place that work for me and the way that I approach things. And so it is very, very exciting for me. I don't really care what they did last year because it doesn't really matter. If they won 10 games, I probably wouldn't be the coach. somebody else would be the coach, or, either the other coach moves on and gets a job, and the assistant takes over. So, and I know the last coach is a really good coach, he'd been a lot of places and been very successful. I really believe that it's about being right person, right place, right time. I think there are plenty of people who are talented enough to coach at this level, that level, this level, that level. I really think it's about fit. And I just felt from the very first moment, the fit here was perfect for me. And I felt, it seems like they felt too, that I was a perfect fit for them, because where they're trying to go in terms of university, I understand and like. They're gonna have, they want bigger rosters. We've always had bigger rosters at VCU. I like it because I like developing players over time. In that group, we've gotten so many guys who end up turning pro who redshirted the first year for us. I brought two of the guys with me. Graham Dugald, who did very well this summer at Charlottesville, and then Tetsu Hirai, a goalkeeper. They came with me from VCU. And again, Graham had played for VDA. He played with Andres. So that's how I knew him. He was Andres' partner in midfield. And Graham's going to be one of our team captains in the fall. Probably shouldn't say that because nobody else knows that, but he will be. He's already, it's already done. So I do think that if we get it right in recruiting, if we get it right in training, then the results will take care of itself. But you have to get it right first. There are no quick fixes in Division I. It is a matter of having a blueprint, growing the blueprint, getting players in, building people, and then success follows the growth of the process. And I hate people using cliches, but it is the truth in this case. To be an effective program where you are good every year, you have to have all the processes right. Doesn't mean you got to spend $1 billion. Doesn't mean you have to have all national team players. It just means there needs to be steady progress and growth and development of the players you have. And when you bring new players in, they need to be assimilated and then grow very quickly. And I think that is really what building a program is, because, my goal is when I leave, whenever it is, the next person is turnkey for them. They walk into something that's ready made. And that was one of the things that Brad, the AD, mentioned to me in my interview process. He said, one of the things I found interesting, coach, is every place you've left, they hired your assistant. And I said, that's not true, is it? He said, yeah, Georgia State, they hired my top assistant. AUM, they hired my assistant and women's head coach. Tusculum, they hired my assistant. And, and then at VCU, they elevated a kid who played for me and came with me to VCU. And so he said, that really speaks well to how you've left the programs, that when you took them over, because we didn't take them all over in great situations, right? Most of them were not in great situations when I took them over. So I'm not going to promise we're going to win a million games right away, but I do think there'll be marked improvement in many areas. They've been very supportive of me and what my ambitions and goals are. So, we'll just go and put our best foot forward and see how the first year goes.
Yeah, well, it's exciting, Coach. We mentioned Evan Gaines and Christian Rodriguez. I did want to shout out another local player that I watched play against Christian this year, Rowan Choi, another, I believe, midfielder as well. And it looks like from looking at your last year, you had a lot of defenders back that played a lot of minutes last year. Mackey's Skrellis, I believe, Marcus Nisa, Max Siz, Luke Holden. Seems like you had a lot of defenders who played a lot of minutes for you that are back this year.
Yeah, and the guys you just mentioned are all guys that were pretty critical parts of the spring. But it just happens to be that's where they returned. We also returned Junie Lee, who was more of an attacking piece. We had another South Korean young man at mid-year that was done before I came. I honored it, but that was done before, and he's going to be very good. And he had a very good spring for us, and we added some other pieces in the spring. And Graham, we brought a guy named Jack in midfield as well from Ireland. And then we brought in a number of transfers, and we brought in, I think we have 23 in our freshman class, and they're from everywhere. People laugh, but it's true. I do a lot of what I call the Noah's Ark recruiting, 2 by 2 by 2. 2 South Koreans, 2 Japanese guys, I have 2 guys from the same club in Canada, 2 more guys from Ontario. I have, Chettery and Roland Choi from that area of Northern Virginia, and so I do a lot of what I call 2 by 2 recruiting, and I do it on purpose, quite frankly. I like to bring multiple players. I have 2 from Costa Rica, And you look down the line, 2 from Argentina. So we do a lot of that because they have somebody from home, but they don't have a conglomeration from home. And so they're not as homesick that way, and yet they still have the comforts of home, if you will.
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of, what we're after, and that kind of stuff. I'm about to roll in a second. We're gonna leave like in 30 minutes, so.
Yeah, coach. I just want to thank you for taking the time. There's a local player here named DT Megliola, plays for Binghamton. So I plan on coming up to your opener game to watch you guys play them and watch Christian,
Yeah.
all your players, and hopefully meet you in person, coach. But I want to thank you for your time. I know it's a busy day. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed talking to you, and I know you're going to be very successful. And can't wait to see how you guys do this year.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm gonna talk to Clarence. I'm gonna text him right now. Tell him I met you, and I'm sure he'll pass along his greetings, but he's a great guy. So
Yeah,
thanks so much for having me today.
it was a lot of fun, coach, and good luck tonight. Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
All right. You're welcome. Bye-bye, coach.